Have you ever had a dream that felt so real, it was more like a memory? Or a feeling of déjà vu so strong it sent a shiver down your spine? What if those weren't just tricks of the mind? What if they were whispers from a life you lived before? Tonight, we're diving into a story that blurs the line between this life and the next. A true account that suggests some souls never forget, and some enemies never let go. This is the story of a man we'll call Alex. For most of his life, Alex was ordinary. He had a steady job, a small circle of friends, and a routine he rarely broke. But that all changed on his 30th birthday. It started with a headache, a splitting pain behind his eyes that no medicine could touch. Then came the flashes. Images of a cobblestone street he'd never seen, the scent of rain on old stone, and a man's face, twisted in a sneer of pure hatred. At first, Alex dismissed them as stress, but the flashes grew more frequent, more detailed. They started to form a narrative. He wasn't just seeing a strange place, he was living asterisk. In these visions, he was a different person, a watchmaker named Thomas in 19th century Europe. He felt Thomas's joy in his craft, his love for a woman with eyes the color of the summer sky, and his chilling, overwhelming fear of one particular man, a business rival named Marcus, whose envy festered into something dark and murderous. The visions became so intense, Alex could feel the chill of the old workshop, hear the ticking of 100 clocks, and taste the metallic tanks of fear in his mouth. He began speaking phrases in a language he'd never learned, yet understood perfectly. He drew detailed maps of a city he'd never visited. His friends were worried. His doctor suggested therapy, maybe a neurological scan, but Alex knew deep in his bones, this wasn't an illness. These were memories. His memories. The most terrifying memory was the last one. It always ended the same way. A dark alley, the glint of a blade in Marcus's hand, a searing pain in his chest, and then darkness. Alex would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding as if it were trying to escape his chest. He was reliving his own murder, night after night. It was Thomas, and he had been killed by Marcus. Driven by a mix of fear and a desperate need for answers, Alex started researching. He pored over old maps, census records, and historical archives online. It was a needle in a haystack, but the memories were his guide. He searched for a watchmaker named Thomas, who lived in the city from his visions, who disappeared around the date his memory fragments suggested, and he found him. A brief newspaper clipping from 1888 mentioned a local watchmaker, Thomas Albrecht, who vanished without a trace, presumed to have fled his debts. His rival, Marcus Richter, took over his shop shortly after. The confirmation sent a cold wave of dread through Alex. This was real. His past life was real. The murder was real. Here's where the story takes a turn from a historical mystery to a present-day horror. One day, while scrolling through social media, Alex froze. He saw a face he recognized instantly, a face that haunted his every waking moment and tormented his sleep. It was older, with lines etched by time, but the eyes were the same, cold, calculating, and filled with a familiar darkness. It was Marcus. But how could that be possible? It had been over a century. Alex clicked on the profile. The man's name was different, of course. He was a wealthy, respected businessman in another country. It seemed like a crazy coincidence, a trick of the mind playing on his obsession. But then Alex saw the man's birth date. It aligned perfectly with the theory of reincarnation, suggesting he could have been reborn shortly after his previous life ended. The similarities in their careers, the echoes of ambition and ruthlessness described in the man's online biographies, it was all too familiar. Alex was now faced with an impossible reality. The soul of his murderer was not only real, but was alive and well in the 21st century, and a terrifying thought began to form in his mind. If his soul had returned, and Marcus's soul had returned, was the animosity between them still there? Was this cosmic cycle doomed to repeat itself? This is where the chase begins. Not a chase through city streets, but a chase across lifetimes. Alex felt an undeniable pull, a sense of unfinished business. He became convinced that this modern day, Marcus somehow knew, on a subconscious level, who he was. strange things began to happen. Alex felt watched. He'd get calls from unknown numbers with only static on the other end. His online accounts would be mysteriously flagged. Coincidence? Paranoia? Or was the soul of an ancient enemy somehow reaching out, drawn by the reemergence of the soul he'd wronged? The story suggests a chilling spiritual truth, that powerful emotions like hate and guilt can latch onto a soul, carrying over from one life to the next, just as Alex's soul carried the trauma of its violent end. Perhaps Marcos's soul carried the unpunished guilt, an unconscious need to find and silence the one person who knew his secret. It's a terrifying thought that we don't just carry our own baggage, but the baggage of lives we can't even remember. Alex's story is a profound and unsettling exploration of karma, justice, and memory. It asks us, if a soul returns, does it seek justice or peace? And what happens when it finds not a memory, but a living, breathing adversary? The chase wasn't about revenge for a past crime, but about survival in the present. Alex had to understand the rules of this spiritual battlefield to ensure that his current life didn't end the same way as his last. He wasn't just fighting a man, he was fighting a destiny, a karmic loop that threatened to trap him forever. This account forces us to look at the world differently, to wonder about the strangers we feel an instant connection or revulsion towards. Could they be figures from a past life? Friends? Lovers? Or enemies? Alex's journey into his soulless history is a stark reminder that the past is never truly dead. It sleeps within us, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And sometimes, when it does, it brings its monsters with it. What do you think? Is this a case of incredible coincidence and psychological distress? Or is it proof that our souls have stories that span centuries? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story as chilling and thought-provoking as I did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. Thank you for watching, and stay safe. Have you ever felt a chill run down your spine? That unsettling feeling that you're not alone, even when no one else is in the room? We often dismiss these feelings, telling ourselves it's just our imagination. But what if you had proof? What if a camera, an emotionless, objective eye, captured something that defied all logical explanation? Tonight, we're diving into a story that does just that. A story that blurs the line between what we know and what we fear. This isn't just a tale told around a campfire. This is a modern haunting, captured frame by a terrifying frame. Our story begins with the Henderson family, Mark, Sarah, and their two young children, Emily and Josh. They had just moved into what they thought was their dream home. A beautiful, spacious house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was old, built in the early 1920s, full of character and charm. For the first few months, life was perfect. The kids loved their new rooms. Mark had his workshop in the garage, and Sarah was busy making the house a home. But then, small, unexplainable things started to happen. It began subtly. A set of keys left on the kitchen counter would be found on the floor in the hallway. A child's toy, put away in the toy box, would reappear in the middle of the living room. At first, they blamed it on forgetfulness, or the kids being mischievous. Sarah would ask Josh, "Did you leave your truck out again?" And he'd shake his head, looking genuinely confused. Mark would find his tools misplaced in the garage and grumble about getting older. They were minor annoyances, easily rationalized, but the frequency started to increase, and the incidents became harder to ignore. One evening, Sarah was cooking dinner. She turned to the spice rack to grab some oregano, and when she turned back, the heavy wooden cutting board that had been in the center of the island was now on the floor, several feet away. There was no one else in the kitchen. The kids were upstairs, and Mark was still at work. The sound of it clattering to the ground had made her jump, but the sheer impossibility of it sent a cold dread through her. How could it have moved? It was too heavy to have simply slid off. The nights grew more unsettling. The family started hearing faint noises after the kids were in bed, soft whispers that seemed to come from the walls. Footsteps creaking on the floorboards above when everyone was downstairs. Emily, their 6-year-old, began complaining about a shadow man who would watch her from the corner of her room at night. They tried to reassure her, telling her it was just a bad dream, but her fear was palpable. She started refusing to sleep in her own room, camping out in a sleeping bag on her parents' floor. The breaking point came when the family went away for a weekend. They returned to find every single kitchen cabinet and drawer wide open. Nothing was taken, nothing was broken, but the sight was deeply disturbing. It was a silent, deliberate act of intrusion. But there were no signs of a break-in. All the doors and windows were locked, just as they had left them. The police came, but they had no explanation. There were no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. It was as if a ghost had methodically opened every single door. That's when Mark decided to take action. He was a practical man, a man who believed in technology and evidence. He told Sarah, "If something is happening in this house, I want to see it." The next day, he went out and bought a state-of-the-art security system with multiple high-definition cameras. He placed them strategically throughout the house, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in the upstairs hallway, and one in Emily's bedroom. He wanted answers. He had no idea he was about to get them. For the first week, the cameras recorded nothing out of the ordinary. The family went about their lives, and the strange occurrences seemed to stop. Mark started to think that perhaps the mere presence of the cameras had been enough to deter a prankster, or maybe it was all in their heads after all. He felt a sense of relief. But the peace was short-lived. On the 8th night, Mark was reviewing the footage from the previous day, a routine he'd developed. He fast-forwarded through hours of an empty, quiet house. Then, he stopped. In the kitchen footage, at exactly 2:13 a.m., something caught his eye. A small, faint orb of light, no bigger than a golf ball, appeared near the ceiling. It hovered for a moment, then zipped across the room with impossible speed before vanishing. Mark replayed it again and again. It wasn't a bug. It wasn't a reflection. It moved with intelligence, with purpose. His heart began to pound. He kept watching. A few minutes later, on the same kitchen camera, a chair at the dining table scraped back slowly, as if someone were pulling it out to sit down. But no one was there. The chair moved a full foot on its own, the sound of its legs dragging across the wood floor captured clearly by the camera's microphone. Mark felt a knot of fear tightened in his stomach. This was real. It was happening. He called Sarah over, his voice trembling slightly. "You need to see this." She watched the footage, her face turning pale. The moving chair, the strange laddit, was undeniable proof that they weren't crazy. But the confirmation brought no comfort, only a deeper, more profound fear. What were they dealing with? The activity escalated dramatically over the next few days. As if their awareness of it was an invitation, the cameras became their window into a terrifying, unseen world. One night, the living room camera captured all the books on a bookshelf flying off, one by one, as if thrown by an invisible tantrum. The upstairs hallway camera recorded the attic door, which was always kept bolted, creaking open on its own in the dead of night. But the most disturbing footage came from Emily's room. Mark and Sarah had been hesitant to watch it, afraid of what they might find. Their worst fears were realized. Late one night, the camera recorded a shadowy mist coalescing near the corner of the room, the same corner where Emily said the shadow man would stand. The mist was faint at first, almost translucent, but it slowly darkened and took on a vague, human-like shape. It wasn't clear, more like a heat haze or a distortion in the air, but it was unmistakably there. It stood motionless for almost an hour, a silent, menacing sentinel watching over their sleeping daughter. Then, just as slowly as it appeared, it dissipated into nothing. Seeing that footage was a violation. An invisible entity was in their child's room, watching her while she slept. The thought was unbearable. The rationalizations were gone, replaced by pure, instinctual terror. This wasn't a playful spirit. It felt malevolent, predatory. The family began to feel like prisoners in their own home. They were exhausted, on edge, sleeping in shifts in the living room. The evidence they had collected was a double-edged sword. It proved they weren't imagining things, but it also confirmed they were living in a house haunted by something they could unsee or fight. They showed the footage to a few close friends, who were skeptical at first, but left visibly shaken, with no logical explanation to offer. What do you do when technology proves your worst nightmare is real? when the very device you installed for a sense of security becomes the source of your greatest fear. The Hendersons were faced with an impossible choice. They had captured undeniable evidence of the paranormal, a collection of clips that would make anyone's blood run cold, objects moving on their own, strange lights with a mind of their own, and most terrifyingly, the ghostly silhouette of an unseen visitor in their child's bedroom. The house was no longer a home. It was a stage for a supernatural drama they were forced to witness. The Hendersons eventually made the only decision they could. They packed their bags, leaving behind their dream house and the unseen entity that had turned it into a nightmare. They never released the full footage publicly, too afraid of the ridicule or unwanted attention it might bring. But the clips were saved, a digital testament to their horrifying experience. This story serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones we can't see. And in our modern world, the all-seeing eye of a security camera might just be the thing that captures the darkness lurking just beyond our perception. What you've heard is based on a collection of real-life accounts from people who used technology to monitor their homes, only to discover they were not alone. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, what might be lurking, just out of sight, in the quiet corners of your own home. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If these stories fascinate and frighten you as much as they do me, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more explorations of the unexplained. And please, share your own experiences in the comments below. Stay safe, and always be aware of the shadows.